Captain Hawk helped a nervous pregnant woman feel better by letting her sit in his pilot's seat. It seemed like a kind gesture. The next day, fighter jets surrounded his plane and forced him to land. The pregnant woman wasn't who she claimed to be, she was a dangerous spy. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The morning sun cast long shadows across Denver International Airport as Captain James Hawk Harrison adjusted his uniform cap and checked his watch. At 45, he had logged over 20 years flying commercial jets, and his weathered face showed the confidence that came with experience. Today's flight to Phoenix would be routine, or so he thought. First Officer Sarah Collins approached with their flight paperwork, her professional demeanor matching his own. "Weather's clear to Phoenix, Captain. Full passenger load, 184 souls on board," she reported crisply. Hawk nodded approvingly. "Good. Let's get these folks home safely." As they prepared for boarding, Hawk's attention was drawn to a pregnant woman sitting alone near gate B27. She appeared to be in her late 20s, well-dressed in expensive clothes, but something about her seemed wrong. While she looked nervous, constantly checking her phone and shifting in her seat, there was an alertness in her eyes that didn't match her anxious behavior. Most expectant mothers he'd seen were tired or excited, but this woman seemed hyper-aware of her surroundings. "That lady over there has been sitting alone this whole time," Hawk mentioned to Sarah. "Looks pretty nervous about flying." Sarah glanced over sympathetically. "First-time mothers often are. My sister was terrified during her pregnancy flights." When boarding began, Hawk positioned himself at the aircraft door to greet passengers personally, a habit that had earned him countless compliments over the years. The pregnant woman approached slowly, her boarding pass trembling slightly in her hands. Up close, he noticed she was further along than he'd initially thought, maybe 7 or 8 months. "Good morning, ma'am. First time flying while pregnant?" Hawk asked gently. The woman looked up at him with startling green eyes that seemed to calculate his every move before she answered. "Yes, Captain. I'm quite nervous about it," she replied with a slight accent he couldn't quite place, possibly Eastern European. Something in her voice didn't match her appearance, but Hawk's compassionate nature took over. "You know what? Would you like to see the cockpit before we take off? Sometimes seeing where all the magic happens helps nervous flyers feel better." The woman's eyes widened, and for a moment, genuine surprise flickered across her features. "Really? You would allow that?" "Of course. We're not quite ready for departure yet. Come on up." Hawk guided her through the first-class cabin toward the cockpit. Sarah looked up from her pre-flight checks, slightly surprised but smiling. "This is First Officer Collins," Hawk introduced. "And this is—" He realized he hadn't asked her name. "Maria," the woman said quickly. "Maria Volkov." She extended her hand to Sarah, who shook it warmly. "Pleasure to meet you, Maria. How far along are you?" Sarah asked conversationally. 7.5 months, Maria replied, her hand instinctively moving to her belly. Hawk gestured toward his captain's seat. "Would you like to sit in the captain's chair for just a moment? I know it sounds silly, but sometimes it helps nervous passengers feel more in control." Maria's eyes lit up with what seemed like genuine excitement. "Could I really? Just for a minute while we finish our checks." Hawk helped her settle into his seat, adjusting it for her comfort. Maria's hands moved across the controls with surprising familiarity, her fingers tracing the instrument panel as if she'd seen similar cockpits before. "This is incredible," she murmured, but her eyes were memorizing everything. Other passengers walking past the open cockpit door smiled at the sweet scene. A kind captain helping a nervous pregnant woman overcome her fear of flying. Flight attendants took photos on their phones, calling it the sweetest thing they'd seen all month. Even some passengers asked if they could take pictures, which Maria allowed with gracious smiles. After a few minutes, Hawk gently helped Maria back to her seat in economy. "Feel better about flying now?" he asked kindly. "Much better, Captain. Thank you so much for your kindness," she replied, her accent seeming less pronounced now. As she walked away, Hawk noticed she moved with more confidence than before, no longer appearing nervous. The flight to Phoenix proceeded normally. Maria sat quietly in her assigned seat, 23F, occasionally making notes in a small journal. She declined most offers of assistance from flight attendants and kept her conversation with other passengers minimal. Hawk made his usual announcement during cruise flight, welcoming passengers and thanking them for choosing their airline. As they began their descent into Phoenix, Maria gathered her belongings carefully and was among the first to disembark when they arrived. She nodded politely to Hawk as she exited, offering a small smile. Thank you again, Captain Harrison. Your kindness meant more than you know. Something in the way she said his name, with perfect pronunciation despite her earlier accent, made him pause, but she was already walking up the jet bridge. The next morning, Hawk was preparing for his regular route from Phoenix back to Denver when his phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Did you see the news about that pregnant passenger from yesterday? They're saying she might be connected to some international incident. Hawk frowned, pulling up news websites on his phone, but found nothing immediately relevant. Flight 447 to Denver was fully booked with 189 passengers. The weather was perfect and Hawk felt good as they pushed back from the gate right on schedule. During taxi, he made his routine announcements about safety and expected flight time. Everything seemed completely normal as they climbed to their cruising altitude of 37,000 feet. They were about an hour into the flight, passing over the Colorado Rockies, when Denver Center came on the radio with an unusual request. United 447, Denver Center. Contact approach control on frequency 124.35 immediately. The controller's voice carried an edge that made both Hawk and Sarah exchange glances. Denver approach, United 447 level at flight level 370, Hawk reported on the new frequency. The response chilled him to the bone. United 447, this is Denver approach. You are directed to immediately descend and maintain flight level 300. Reduce speed to 250 knots. You will be escorted to Peterson Air Force Base for an emergency landing. Approach, United 447. Can you clarify the nature of the emergency? We show no mechanical issues, Hawk responded, his training keeping his voice steady even as his heart rate increased. Before the controller could respond, Sarah grabbed his arm and pointed out the left window. Two F-16 Fighting Falcons had appeared alongside their aircraft, flying in perfect formation. The fighter jets were close enough that Hawk could see the pilots in their cockpits, their faces hidden behind oxygen masks and helmet visors. The military aircraft maintained their position with precision, clearly escorting rather than intercepting. United 447, maintain current heading and descent rate. Do not deviate from instructions. Military escort is for your protection and the security of other aircraft in the area, the controller advised. Hawk's mind raced. In 20 years of flying, he'd never experienced anything like this. Passengers on the left side of the aircraft began pointing out the windows, some taking pictures with their phones. A few started to panic when they realized military jets were escorting their commercial flight. Flight attendants moved quickly through the cabin, trying to calm passengers and prevent widespread panic. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking, Hawk announced over the intercom, his voice carefully controlled. We are currently being escorted to an alternate landing location as a precautionary measure. There is no immediate danger to the aircraft or passengers. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened and follow all instructions from the flight attendants. Sarah worked frantically through emergency checklists while monitoring their descent. Hawk, what could this be about? We haven't done anything wrong. Hawk shook his head, but a cold realization was beginning to form. That pregnant woman yesterday, Maria Volkov. Something about her didn't seem right. The F-16s maintained their escort position as they descended toward Peterson Air Force Base. Hawk had landed there during his Air Force days, but never under circumstances like these. The runway appeared ahead, longer and wider than typical commercial airports, designed for military aircraft operations. United 447, cleared for landing runway 35 left. After touchdown, follow the vehicle that will escort you to the secure ramp area. Do not shut down engines until instructed, came the crisp military air traffic control voice. Hawk acknowledged and executed a perfect landing despite his mounting anxiety. A convoy of black SUVs and military vehicles surrounded their aircraft as soon as they stopped rolling. Armed security personnel took positions around the plane while passengers watched through windows in growing fear. Captain, what's happening? Several passengers called out, but Hawk had no answers to give them. Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived safely at our alternate destination, Hawk announced. Please remain seated while we coordinate with ground personnel. We will provide updates as soon as we have more information. His calm voice masked the turmoil he felt inside. A mobile stairway approached the aircraft, and moments later, several federal agents in dark suits boarded. The lead agent, a stern woman in her 40s with calculating eyes, approached the cockpit. Captain Harrison, I'm Special Agent Patricia Rodriguez, FBI. We need you to come with us immediately. What about my passengers? And my crew? Hawk asked, standing slowly. Your passengers will be processed and released shortly. This is about events that occurred on your flight yesterday from Denver to Phoenix, Agent Rodriguez replied. Specifically, your interaction with a passenger named Maria Volkov. Hawk's blood ran cold. The pregnant woman? What about her? Rodriguez gestured toward the exit. That's what we need to discuss, Captain. Now. As they escorted him down the stairs, Hawk saw his passengers being led off the aircraft by additional agents and security personnel. They looked confused and frightened, many trying to use their cell phones which appeared to have no signal. Sarah caught his eye through the cockpit window, her expression worried and questioning. The black SUV ride to the secure facility took only minutes, but felt like hours. Agent Rodriguez sat silently across from him, reviewing files and occasionally speaking into a secure radio. Hawk's mind raced through every detail of his interaction with Maria Volkov, trying to understand what could have possibly gone wrong. The interrogation facility was sterile and windowless, designed to be intimidating. Agent Rodriguez sat across from Hawk at a metal table while two other agents observed from the corner. A digital recorder sat between them, its red light indicating active recording. Captain Harrison, let's start with yesterday morning at Denver International Airport. Tell me about your interaction with passenger Maria Volkov, Rodriguez began, her voice professional but urgent. Hawk recounted the events exactly as they had occurred, leaving out no details. You allowed her to sit in your captain's seat? Rodriguez asked, making notes. For how long? Hawk thought carefully. Maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Just long enough for her to feel more comfortable about flying. It seemed like a harmless gesture to help a nervous pregnant woman. Rodriguez exchanged glances with her colleagues before pulling out a photograph and sliding it across the table. Captain, the woman you knew as Maria Volkov is actually Svetlana Petrov, a former Russian intelligence operative wanted by multiple international agencies for espionage and terrorism-related activities. Hawk stared at the photograph in shock. It was definitely the same woman, but the intelligence file showed her with different hair and no pregnancy. That's impossible. She was clearly pregnant, at least 7 months along. Rodriguez pulled out another file. Sophisticated prosthetic pregnancy suit, probably equipped with recording devices and possibly other surveillance equipment. Recording devices? Hawk repeated, the implications hitting him like a physical blow. You think she was recording our cockpit procedures? Rodriguez nodded grimly. Captain, the Boeing 737-800 series you fly is used by dozens of airlines worldwide. The cockpit procedures, security measures, and flight systems she observed could be invaluable to terrorist organizations. Agent Rodriguez continued, Petrov disappeared from our surveillance 3 days ago. We've been tracking her movements, and yesterday morning she used forged documents to board your flight. We didn't know about your gesture until airport security footage was reviewed. Hawk felt sick to his stomach. His simple act of kindness had potentially compromised aviation security. What exactly did she record? What damage could this cause? Rodriguez consulted her files again. We're still assessing that. But Petrov has connections to several international terrorist networks. Any information she gathered could be used to plan attacks on commercial aircraft. Is that why you intercepted my flight today? Do you think I'm involved with her? Hawk asked, his voice rising slightly. Rodriguez shook her head. No, Captain. Your background check is clean, and we believe you were an unwitting participant. But we needed to ensure she hadn't made contact with you again or left anything on your aircraft. Over the next several hours, agents questioned Hawk about every detail of his interaction with Svetlana Petrov. They showed him additional photographs and intelligence reports, building a picture of a highly trained operative who had successfully infiltrated airline security. The pregnancy disguise had been nearly perfect, generating sympathy and reducing suspicion. The photographs passengers took in your cockpit have been extremely helpful, Rodriguez explained. We can see exactly what she was looking at, what instruments she examined. This helps us understand what information she may have gathered. Hawk realized that what had seemed like innocent tourist photos were actually documenting a potential security breach. Agent Rodriguez pulled out a tablet showing surveillance footage from the airport. Look at this, Captain. This is footage of Petrov before she approached your gate. In the video, the same woman moved with obvious training, her eyes constantly scanning her environment. Her nervous pregnant woman act began only when she sat down near the gate. We believe she specifically chose your flight because of your reputation for kindness to passengers, Rodriguez continued. Our investigation shows she researched several pilots and selected you because passenger reviews consistently mention your compassionate treatment of nervous flyers. The revelation that his good reputation had been weaponized against him hit Hawk harder than any of the previous information. So my kindness made me a target? Rodriguez looked at him sympathetically. Unfortunately, yes. But your cooperation today is helping us track her network and potentially prevent future attacks. As the interrogation continued, agents revealed that Petrov had connections to a larger conspiracy involving multiple terrorist cells across different countries. The cockpit information she gathered from Hawk's aircraft could be combined with intelligence from other sources to plan coordinated attacks on commercial aviation. "We need your help, Captain," Rodriguez said as their session drew to a close. "Petrov is still in the United States, and we believe she may try to contact you again. If she does, we need you to cooperate with our investigation." Hawk nodded immediately. "Of course, whatever you need to stop her." The agents explained they would be monitoring his communications and flights for the next several weeks. Hawk would continue his normal schedule, but with additional security measures in place. "Your passengers from today's flight have been debriefed and released. They've been told this was a security exercise, which is partially true." As evening fell, Hawk was finally cleared to leave the facility. Agent Rodriguez walked him to the exit personally. "Captain, I want you to know that your cooperation today has been invaluable. We understand the situation isn't your fault, and we appreciate your professionalism in handling it." Driving back to his hotel, Hawk reflected on how dramatically his life had changed in just 24 hours. A simple gesture of kindness had thrust him into the world of international espionage and terrorism. He thought about all the passengers he'd helped over the years, wondering if any of them had ulterior motives he'd missed. His phone rang, startling him from his thoughts. It was Sarah, calling from the crew hotel. "Hawk, are you okay? The FBI agents wouldn't tell us anything except that you were helping with their investigation." Hawk summarized what he could share, watching Sarah's expressions change from concern to disbelief to anger. "She used your kindness against you," Sarah said firmly. "That's not your fault, Hawk. You did what any decent person would do." But Hawk couldn't shake the feeling that his good intentions had potentially endangered countless lives. 3 days later, as Hawk prepared for another flight, Agent Rodriguez called with an update. "We've arrested Petrov and 3 of her associates based on information gathered from your aircraft. The conspiracy was larger than we initially thought, but your cooperation helped us prevent what could have been catastrophic attacks." Standing in the cockpit of his next flight, Hawk looked out at the boarding passengers with new eyes. The pregnant woman in seat 12A received extra attention from flight attendants. The businessman in first class who asked detailed questions about the aircraft was noted by security. The world had changed for Hawk, and his innocent trust in passenger motivations had been forever altered. But as they pushed back from the gate and began their taxi to the runway, Hawk realized something important. Despite everything that had happened, he couldn't let fear and suspicion replace his basic humanity. Yes, he would be more careful and observant. But he wouldn't stop caring about his passengers or treating them with kindness. "Tower, United 523 ready for departure," he announced into his radio, his voice steady and professional. As they lifted off into the clear sky, Hawk made a silent promise to continue being the compassionate pilot his passengers deserved, while remaining vigilant against those who would exploit that compassion for evil purposes. The cockpit door remained locked and secure, but Hawk's heart remained open to the genuine needs of the people he served. In a world where kindness could be weaponized, he chose to believe that kindness itself was still worth the risk. The alternative, a world without compassion, would be a victory for people like Svetlana Petrov. As they climbed toward their cruising altitude, Hawk reflected on the lesson he'd learned. In an interconnected world of international intrigue, even the smallest gestures could have enormous consequences. But that knowledge wouldn't stop him from being human. It would just make him wiser about when and how to extend his humanity to others. The story of Captain Harrison and the pregnant spy became a cautionary tale within aviation security circles, reminding pilots and crew that threats could come in the most unexpected forms. But it also became a reminder that good people doing good things shouldn't stop being good. They should just be more careful about whom they trust with their goodness. In the end, Hawk's act of kindness, despite its unintended consequences, had actually helped prevent a major terrorist attack. Sometimes he realized doing the right thing for the wrong person still leads to the right outcome. The key was learning to live with the complexity of that truth while continuing to serve others with professional excellence and human compassion.